I want to go over really quick. All right, good morning. This is day 2 of Module 2, Lesson 1. All right, we started the notebook on Tuesday when we met, and we did the supporting question, the vocab, and then we started looking at the legislative process, right? The whole theme this week is we're looking at the 3 branches of government, and we're specifically looking at the legislative branch. So also known as Congress. So if you hear legislative, and this is the largest of the 3. So there's the executive, which is the president. We're going to look at next week. There's the legislative. That's what we're that's what we're looking at this week. And then there's the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court, and we'll look at that in a couple of weeks. So we're looking at basically how the federal government was set up under the new Constitution, right after the Articles of Confederation, with the checks and balances between 3 branches. So now we're going into those 3 branches. How do they function? What is their role? What power do they have? What power do they not have? And how does it create stability so that no one person, branch, or party becomes too powerful, right? Or gets out of line, that they're following the Constitution. All right. So we're going to continue that discussion today. A couple of things I wanted to review. Progress grades are up. Okay. So I graded everything as of yesterday morning and posted progress grades. So your progress grade in Infinite Campus is based on yesterday's materials that were turned in or weren't turned in. Okay. It does not go on your transcript, but it is the light bulb, right? Like either, yay, I'm doing a good job. But honestly, for a majority of you, it's a kick in the butt, right? It's time. Let's go. Okay. We got to get our work in. We've got to get our work in. All right. Especially the assessments, right? Because those are 90% of the grade. So making sure you get those quizzed. It should be an easy class. I agree. We do everything together except the test. I give you notes. Like we do the entire notebook together. Like there's really no excuse. So yes, and you need this class to graduate. Exactly. You're making very good points. Yes, we need this class to graduate. So please, please, please get on it. Get your stuff in. All right. Now let's talk about the late window. This is where it gets a little bit frustrating for me sometimes. I've been really clear about this. NVLA gives 1 week, right? I give you that extra week. So that meets the double time accommodations, right? Okay. Once it closes, you already had your extension. You already got double the time. So it is closed. Once it is closed, it is closed. Okay. Because I already did the extension. So emailing me or having your parents email me, you need to reopen this when we did it in class and you had 2 weeks, not 1 week, 2 weeks. You had the extra time. That has been met. Okay. So once it closes, it is closed. Okay. So you need to be communicating to your parent guardian that I am doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. All right. Yes. This shouldn't be stressful. I agree. You're preaching to the choir on that one. Yes. Okay. So please, 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 if you aren't getting something in, that is on you. Okay. You need to stay on top of your stuff. Come see me in small group. Okay. Other than that one video, I record all the videos, right? So you can go back and watch them. So all the other videos work to my knowledge. All right. And I'm sorry about that video. So try to use that and you're logged out of your school account. Hopefully you could come see me. I can try to give you some tips. Okay. I'm not going to redo the entire lesson, but I'm happy to give some help. Okay. So yes. So are we clear on the late window? Okay. 2 weeks is the double time. Give me a thumbs up. Yes. Thank you. The 2 weeks is the double time. So if it's closed, you need to communicate fairly to your parents and guardian. That's on you, not me. Okay. And again, that's fair. Okay. Also, if you are behind, if your grade is low, where do you look to see what's still open? If you go to the announcements, every Monday, Friday, right? I post without fail what is due and then what is past due and when it closes. So for example, right now, if your progress grade is not good, which I would say about 2/3 of you need to bring up your grade. That's a lot. All right. We need to get it in gear. Module 1, lesson 3, the notebook and the quiz are still open till Monday, the 11th, and then module 1, lesson 4 notebook and the module 1 assessment. Biggest thing that will have an impact on your grade is the assessment, the module 1 assessment. That's worth 30 points, it's worth a lot of points. Okay, so please, please, please get on the ball. Use this 3-day weekend to get caught up, okay? One last thing, okay? If you turn something in past due, you do not need to email me, okay? Your bad planning and turning something in late is not my emergency. I promise I will grade it, okay? I get to pretty much everything within 48 hours, okay? It gets done. So emailing me the moment that you turn something in, that's not necessary, okay? When I log in during school hours, I will see that, okay? I don't need reminding, okay? Now, if it's been a week and I haven't graded something, of course, email me, okay? But when you turn something in late, I am not going to grade it there in the next 5 minutes. That's unreasonable, okay? It will get graded in the next day or two, all right? So please just think about, like, you know, you turned it in late. I got everything graded, so you need to allow that 24 to 48 hours. It will get graded, okay? But it's not going to be immediate. I'm not an at-will grading service, okay? So it'll save you time, me time, and I promise I will get to it, okay? I stay on top of my grading pretty good. All right, any questions? And I don't mean this to be mean or anything like that. Well, that's what I say. You turn it in late, it's fair that you wait. You know, it's not my emergency because you turned something in late. Yeah, it will get graded and it's not going to be docked. I'm not docking it. You're not being penalized, but it's not fair to expect me. Yes, late work is better than no work, but it's not fair to expect me to respond and grade it right then. That's unreasonable. Okay. So I will get to it usually within 24 to 4. Every morning I grade. Mondays and Fridays, I clear out my queue. So like for sure, if Monday it'll get graded or Friday it'll get graded. And then I try to grade in between as well. Okay. All right. So I'm just saying that because I've been getting some emails and it takes me a lot of time to respond. I need to explain things. I have to explain to your parents and what's going on when you should be doing that and stuff. So I'm just trying to say, like, let's be responsible and you do your part. I do my part, but you also need to hold up your end. Okay. All right. Let's get started. We're going to jump back into the notebook. So again, this is where do it with me, and then you can literally submit it. There's no reason that your notebook should be missing. All right. And by learning this material, it helps you review for the quiz, right? So 2 in 1, and I will give you the notes today. So we left off. Okay, we'll get to this here in just a second. Let's go over into Canvas. We left off, we're talking about the legislative branch, right? So the legislative branch is 2 parts, okay? It is the House of Representatives, which is 435 members, and it is the Senate, which is 100 members, okay? The House of Representatives is the compromise that the larger states, so more population, get more representatives, have more say. But then the smaller states didn't want to be railroaded. So the other compromise was that the smaller states through the Senate would have fair, equal representation. So we have this compromise, okay? So we're going to move on to number 4, which is how is Congress actually broken up into the House and the Senate? So you need to have your notebook open. Remember, this should be saved on your Google Drive. Okay, we did the supporting question, we did the key vocab, and we did number 3. And we're going to be starting here at number 4. So give me a thumbs up when you have your notebook open. You're ready to go. If you missed class on Tuesday, then you need to go back and you can watch the day 1 video, okay? Let's rock, yes. Like Schoolhouse Rock, that was so cute, right? I'm just a bill, oh, I'm only a bill, and I made it onto Capitol Hill. Okay, I'll stop. All right. So, okay, here we go. So Congress, also known as the legislative, is made up of 2 parts, okay? So there's the House of Representatives, which is the first part, okay? And it's the larger of the 2. 435 members, that's a lot, okay? Now, here are the requirements to run for office, and it's actually a lot more lenient than you would think. You need to be 25 years old. That's pretty young. I think a lot of people barely finish college at 24, 25, okay? You need to have been a U.S. citizen for at least 7 years. So you can be an immigrant. You don't have to have been born in this country, but you have to have had citizenship for at least 7 years. And then you have to live within the state you are running for election, okay? So we would want somebody to be from Nevada, right? Or at least live in Nevada for a while if they're going to represent us. That makes sense. There are 435 seats, okay? And again, it's dispersed based on how many people live in that state. Then we have the other side, which is the Senate. So it's the smaller, okay? So these 2 make up the great compromise so that larger states are represented, but also smaller states have representation. So the Senate is a little bit steeper, okay, or a little bit harder requirements. So you have to be 30, a little bit older, 30, okay? You need to have been a citizen for 9 years instead of 7, okay? So 9 years. And again, also reside within the state, okay? And every state gets 2 senators. So there's 100 members in that branch. All right, let's look at number 4. What are the roles of each, the House and the Senate, unique? So the leadership is very, very similar, okay? But they represent different portions of the compromise, right? Okay, so this is number 4. There you go. So the leadership is very similar, but the House of Representatives is based on population and the Senate is based on equality, right? Population equality, and then the Senate is based on just equal across the board. Everybody is the same. All right, second part of number 4. How is the U.S. Congress organized? Why did the founders organize it this way? So doing the 2 houses or the 2 chambers was a compromise to try to make sure that the larger states were having their voice heard, which makes sense. They have more people, more money, more problems. You know what I mean? Okay. But also then that the smaller states weren't being railroaded. Think if it was only based on population, basically we would all be like mini Californias because California has the largest population. They would basically rule the roost and make all the decisions. Now, I don't know about you. There's a lot of positive things about California, but I don't want to live by California laws. I like Nevada laws. Okay. So I'm glad that it's not just the big states rule. All right. They have really, really high taxes there. Some of their policies I don't agree with. So I'm glad that the smaller states like us, like Wyoming, like Alaska, have a voice as well. And that's through the Senate. Okay. So both are important. The other difference between them is the House is only 2-year terms. So it's really quick. 2-year terms. So the House tends to be more competitive because you're constantly, every decision you're making, you're worried that you won't get reelected. So you're constantly trying to make people happy because you want to be reelected. The Senate is a 6-year term, so it's a lot longer. And the reason they did it that way is so that it would encourage more compromise. Those senators don't have to stress so much about, am I going to be voted out in the next election? Like they have a little bit more time to establish a record and not so much pressure. So there's actually more encouragement to compromise, which sometimes people don't like, but that's the reality. To get things done, there has to be compromise. All right, we're going to watch this quick video and then we'll go over the review questions.
Hi, I'm Craig, and this is Crash Course Government. It's been a dream of mine to be on Crash Course since I was a little kid. Speaking of acting like a little kid, today we're going to talk about the U.S. Congress, which, according to the Constitution, is the most important branch of government. That was probably written by Congress. It wasn't. They didn't exist yet. So when I say that Congress is supposed to be the most important branch of government, I'm talking about the national government, not the state government. There's a difference, okay? I know this because the Constitution, which consists of 7 articles and 28 amendments, mentions Congress first. In fact, right after the preamble, the very first section of the very first article, which is helpfully labeled Article 1, Section 1, says this: "All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives." So right away, the Constitution sets up a 2-house legislature with a Senate and a House of Representatives. The Latin word for this is bicameral, and I promise I'll quit with the Latin now. I didn't really say much Latin, but just once, but I won't say anymore. That's pretty catchy. So let's start with the House of Representatives because it's a little easier. In order to serve in the House, you have to be 25 years old, a citizen for 7 years, and a resident of the state that you hope to represent. I'd like to think that I represent a state of enjoyment. Vote for me. 2015. Representation is determined by population. No state has fewer than 1. Vermont, North and South Dakota, Wyoming, and Alaska each have 1. And the most populous state, California, has 52. Right now, there are 435 members of the House of Representatives. The Senate has 2 senators from each state for a total of 100. To be a senator, you must be at least 30 years old, a citizen for 9 years, and a resident of the state you hope to represent. Originally, senators were chosen by the state legislatures, which meant that they tended to be politically important members of a state's elite class. But this changed with the 17th Amendment, and now senators are elected by the people, just like representatives. I'm going to explain how the two houses of the legislature actually legislate in a later episode. I'll have a bigger beard, probably. But now I'm going to point out a few of the ways that they are different. Ultimately, the houses do the same thing, make laws, but the Constitution grants certain specific powers to each house. Let's look at those powers in the thought bubble. The House of Representatives is given the power to impeach the president and other federal officials. This can be confusing because people tend to think that impeaching means kicking the official out of office, but it doesn't. The House impeaches an official by deciding that that person has done something bad enough to bring him to trial. An impeachment is like a criminal indictment. Once the official is impeached, a trial happens in the Senate. If it's the president who's been impeached, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presides. Otherwise, it's the vice president. You don't let the VP preside over a presidential impeachment trial because he has a vested interest in seeing the president removed. Then the VP would become president. Duh. The second power that the House has is that they decide presidential elections if no candidate wins a majority of the Electoral College. I'll explain this later, but for now remember that this barely ever has happened ever. The third power that belongs specifically to the House is found in Article 1, Section 7. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. This is pretty important because it means that any bill that raises taxes starts in the House. And if you know anything about America, you know that we care about taxes. A lot. So this power is huge, and it's sometimes called the power of the purse. The Senate has some important powers too. The first one I've already mentioned is that they hold impeachment trials. That doesn't happen very often at all. Another power the Senate has is to ratify treaties. This requires a 2/3 vote of the Senate. Most treaties you don't hear much about, except when the Senate refuses to ratify them, as it did, or didn't do, with the Treaty of Versailles. I totally would have ratified that treaty, just saying. The last significant power that belongs only to the Senate is the confirmation power. The Senate votes to confirm the appointment of executive officers that require Senate confirmation. Some of these, like the cabinet secretaries, are obvious, but there are over 1,000 offices requiring Senate confirmation, including federal judges, and this is probably too many. Thanks, Thought Bubble. I love saying that. Yes! So those are the major differences between the two houses of the legislature. But why do we have two, and why did the framers of the Constitution make them different anyway? There are two categories of reason here, historical and practical. The historical reason for the two houses is that when the Constitution was being written, the framers couldn't agree on what type of legislature to have because they came from states with different interests. Delegates from states with large populations wanted legislators to be chosen based on the state's population so that their states would have, wait for it, more legislators and more power. This is called proportional representation. States with small populations understandably didn't want proportional representation. They favored equal representation in the legislature, which would give them equal power. Large states supported what was called the Virginia Plan, and small states wanted the New Jersey Plan, and they argued over it until a compromise was reached. Since it was brokered by Connecticut's Roger Sherman, it was called the Connecticut Compromise, or more usually, the Great Compromise, because historians are really bad at naming things. Hey, this war is 9 years long. Let's call it the 7 Years' War. That's actually genius. If you guessed that the compromise was an upper house with equal representation and a lower house with proportional representation, congratulations, you understand the Great Compromise. You don't win anything if you guessed it right. Actually, if you guessed it right, click here and watch me punch an eagle. So that's the historical reason for the two houses, but what about the practical reasons? One of the main reasons to divide the legislature and give the two houses different powers is to make it so that the legislature doesn't have too much power. How do we know that the framers wanted this? Because one of them, James Madison, told us in one of the Federalist Papers. In Federalist 51, Madison wrote, "In Republican government, the legislative authority necessarily predominates. The remedy for this inconveniency is to divide the legislature into different branches and to render them, by different modes of election and different principles of action, as little connected with each other as the nature of their common functions and their common dependence on the society will admit." James Madison might not have sounded like Foghorn Leghorn, but that's one of the theories. My theory. I say. Anyway, the idea that one house of the legislature can limit the power of the other house is called an intra-branch check. We'll look at this in more detail when we talk about checks and balances. In general, the framers of the Constitution were kind of obsessed with the idea that the government might have too much power. So we'll be seeing a lot of examples of how they tried to deal with this. So let's finish up by looking at the reasons why the specific powers were given to each house. To do this, let me introduce my assistants, and by assistants, I really mean clones. Let's go to the clone zone! So I made these clones to help us understand these multi-sided issues. This is Senate clone, and this is House clone, and they're quite good looking, I might add.
So you may have noticed, according to the Constitution, senators are expected to be older than representatives. And although 30 isn't all that old today, it was in 1787 when the Constitution was written. This was because older people are wiser, or at least more experienced, and the framers wanted the Senate, which is sometimes called the upper house, to be more serious, august, dignified, and above all, deliberative than the House. It was supposed to be more immune from the desires of the public, which the framers were kind of afraid of because of their unfortunate propensity to riot. One of the ways that the framers hoped to ensure this was by giving senators a 6-year term, which really would mean that they could ignore the rantings and ravings of their constituents for at least, 5 years at a time. Because the Senate is supposed to be the more deliberative body and the one that is more insulated from public opinion, they're the ones given the power to confirm public ministers and to ratify treaties. I guess they thought that, being older and wiser, senators would be better judges of character and better able to govern based on the sense of what is in the public interest. Sometimes the idea that a representative should govern based on what he thinks is best for the people rather than what they say they want is referred to as representative acting as a trustee.
Which is another way of saying that the Senate is full of elitist snobs that don't care what their constituents want at all. In the House, representatives are supposed to take into consideration the desires of the people in their districts who voted for them, acting in the role of delegates. So the main way that the framers tried to ensure that representatives could be more responsive to their voters, other than having them directly elected by the voters instead of state legislatures, was to give them 2-year terms. This meant that they had to be responsive to the changing opinion of voters in their districts, otherwise they could easily be voted out of office. You don't want that. No way. Oh boy. Why they would be given the power of impeachment is sort of beyond me, but it totally makes sense to give the power of the purse to the branch of government that's closest to the people. After all, one thing that the government does that is directly related to almost everybody is taxes. So you want the most democratic body making decisions that have the most direct effect on people. Thanks, clones. So there you have it. That's the basics of our bicameral Congress, including the differences between the two houses and why they are that way. I used Latin again.
Okay, so I think he does a good overview of why we have a House, why we have a Senate. Okay, so it's this compromise that the larger states have more representation, but the smaller states have a fair playing field as well. Okay, so now let's go back over into Canvas. And let's go over the review questions. Okay, the checking for understanding. The primary function of Congress is to make laws. So when we look at the function of the 3 branches, the legislative branch, their number 1 role is to make laws. They make laws. They have the power of the purse, which means they control the money, and declaring war. Okay, so they have very clear functions or responsibilities. In addition to legislating, Congress also has all the following duties except. So they can impeach federal offices. So if a judge or a president, somebody's out of line, they have the authority to get them in trouble. They ratify treaties. They declare war. They do not select federal judges. That's the one thing they don't do. The president selects federal judges. Now, the Senate approves them, but they don't select them. So they have to choose from or approve what the president puts in front of them or reject what the president puts in front of them and the president finds somebody else. Representation in Congress is determined in what manner or in this manner. So it's based on state population, not the size, but the population, and then the equality amongst the Senate. So House is population, Senate, everyone gets 2. Who may propose a new law? Okay, so before it becomes a law, it's known as a bill. So who can propose a bill? And that can be any member of Congress. Anyone in the House or the Senate can propose a bill. Over 10,000 bills are proposed every year. Less than 10% actually become law. So most that are proposed fail. Candidates in the House and the Senate must live in the state that they are running in. Okay, that is definitely a requirement that both have, that you have to be living within the state that you are running for. Where are almost all newly proposed bills sent after formally being introduced in either the House or the Senate? They are sent to a committee that is responsible for that area. So depending on what type of law it is it agriculture, defense, education, depending on what the theme is, it is sent to that committee. If it can't pass committee, then it's dead. If it passes committee, then it might again go then to the House. If it passes there, then it goes to the Senate and it moves on. But it has to start in committee because there's just too many to do on the House floor. All right, let's go to powers of Congress. So what powers does Congress, aka the legislative, have? So this is talking about the House and the Senate. Because remember, Congress and legislative, those are 2 terms used to talk about the 2 same chambers. Okay, so what are their responsibilities? There's 2 types of powers. There's enumerated and there's implied. So enumerated means literally written in the Constitution. Implied means that it's assumed, okay? It might not be written down, but it's assumed. So we are looking at the enumerated powers. Here's the list. So this is literally written in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. They have the power of the purse. Okay, so that's the power of money to maintain the armed forces. So to determine how much money goes to the armed forces, to build bases, to order weapons, training, technology. They have the power to declare war. They have the power to regulate interstate commerce, so trade between the states. They have the power to make laws, to introduce laws. Now, they don't appoint judges, but they can impeach judges. So if judges are not doing their constitutional duty, they break the law, they're out of line, they have the power to remove them. And then to ratify treaties. So these are the enumerated clear powers that they have. Okay, so if we go over to number 5, what are 3 specific powers that Congress that gives them the most influence in the US government? So it's through those enumerated powers. This is number 5. Power to tax, borrowing, spending, to make laws, to impeach, to declare war. So they have a lot of power. Their lane is very specific, but they have very specific powers that they are enabled. Does the power of Congress to investigate enhance or impede the effectiveness of the executive branch? So the executive branch is the president. So the fact that Congress can investigate and possibly get the president in trouble, is this a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a good thing. It creates accountability. We want the president to do their job, but we want them to also not be power hungry, to be abusing power. And so there has to be a checks and balance, and that is the Congress's responsibility. If you think about it, the president is the most powerful position in the country. Somebody has to hold them accountable. Otherwise, why would they do it, right? Why would they follow the laws? So I think it's important. It creates checks and balances and to make sure that no one branch, person, or party becomes too powerful and to avoid tyranny. So once we have that, we'll go back over into Canvas and we'll look at our review questions. Congress has 2 general categories of power. So again, those are enumerated, which is written down, black and white, and then implied, which is assumed. So we're going to do enumerated and implied. The most flexible part of Article 1, Section 8 is, so it starts out with the necessary and proper clause. So when they're going over the responsibilities of Congress, there's a section that talks about that their responsibilities are necessary and proper. It creates flexibility because who defines what's necessary? Who defines what's proper? If you're in one political party and I'm in the other, and we're talking about a certain issue, let's say gun laws. There's a lot of different opinions on that. How many guns are necessary? What laws are necessary? What's the proper use or parameters of having a weapon, right? There's a lot of debate about that and stuff. So the reason that this is considered flexible is because how I might define or interpret necessary and proper is probably different than how someone else is going to define necessary and proper, depending on the topic. So it's open to interpretation, aka flexible. Which of the following best explains why the U.S. Constitution gives the power to regulate taxation to Congress rather than the president? The colonists wanted to make sure that taxation was determined by an appointed body. Because again, if it's the power of one person, the president, they could go extreme with that. There's no checks to that. You want to make sure that the taxation is representing the people and that the money is being used for the benefit of the people, not the president. So by having the appointed body, Congress, the House and the Senate, determine taxation and also control the budget, control the money, it ensures hopefully that it's being used responsibly. That's questionable sometimes, but more responsibly than maybe the president would. And to make sure make sure we're not overspending and things like that, which unfortunately we do a lot. There's a lot of hypocrisy within government, unfortunately. Article 1, Section 8 provides Congress with the power to have an Army and Navy. But then how does the Constitution allow for the U.S. Air Force to be added? And again, it's because of the preamble talks providing for the common defense, the necessary and proper. It creates elasticity of interpretation. Obviously, when they wrote the Constitution, there were no planes. Air travel was not a thing. Once air travel became a thing, you can then kind of argue, well, it's necessary because our enemies might have planes, so we have to have planes to combat them, right? The framers sought to limit government power in part by, all right, and that is giving the power of judicial, oh, nope, that's the wrong one. Listing or enumerating specific powers that are given and denied to Congress. So being very clear about each branch's role. Here's your lane. If it doesn't fit in within that lane, it belongs to another lane. If you get out of your lane, you're going to be in trouble. What is an example of an implied power of Congress? So implied means assumed. Okay, so one example of that would be the creation of a national bank. So for example, an enumerated power is the power of the purse, right? The Congress controls the budget. The president comes up with it, but Congress has to approve it and they write the checks. Well, where are they going to keep all that money? So it came a point where, yes, we have a lot of debt. We have a lot of debt. Yeah, we have a lot of debt. A lot of debt, unfortunately. So again, yeah, when we talk about being responsible, it's kind of a little bit laughable, right? Because they just keep driving us more and more into debt. And neither party really seems to care. The Democrats and Republicans, it's like nobody really seems to want to stop it or do things. They just want to keep spending more and they justify spending more. And it's like, okay, but how is that going to hurt us? By spending now, how is that going to hurt us tomorrow? You know what I mean? The benefit now. That's a good question. Let me Google it. So which country has the most debt? The United States has the world's highest national debt. Yep, we get the prize, 31.4. So it looks like here is the chart. So it looks like we are in the lead. UK is behind us. France, Germany, Japan is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th in line. Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Ireland. That's really sad. Again, yeah, very, very sad. Not good use of resources. Not good use of resources. And again, both parties are, someday it's going to, what are we doing? We're overspending. This is where, again, just because I want something doesn't mean I can have it, right? The government cannot provide everything. And they're trying to provide more and more, but we don't have the money for it. So they have to do one of two things. They either have to cut spending or they have to tax us more. So then you get into a debate, right? Some people want higher taxes because they want the government to do more. Some people don't. Some people are like, no, I want to be responsible for me. I want to keep my money and I'll take care of my needs. So it's really a philosophy of life. You know what I mean? Do you want to be more, do you want to keep more of your money and be more responsible for yourself? Or do you want to give more of your money to the government and they take care of more? And that's kind of where it comes down to, but they aren't, yeah, we're spending more than we're taking in. And it's, yeah, it's long-term, it's concerning for sure. What is an example of an implied power? So opening a bank. So they control the money, but they need to keep it somewhere. So when they opened a bank, it just kind of made sense because like we have to have somewhere safe to keep the money. What is an example of an exclusive power, meaning something only something that they can do? Confirmation of presidential appointments by the Senate. So when the president wants to appoint or hire someone, they have to be approved by the Senate again to make sure that we're hiring competent people, not just my friend or my buddy. More money does not always solve everything, because if you look at government waste in the education system, I don't share the popular opinion that we just need more money toward education. There is a lot of money already in education. The problem with money in education is they earmark it. They tell us where to spend it instead of allowing us to spend it properly. So for example, they buy new curriculum every 4 or 5 years. The curriculum is the same. They spend millions and millions of dollars on some new program, some new thing, but they don't pay for teachers. They don't pay for new buildings. They don't pay. So the money's there. They're just misspending the money. So politicians will be like, we're going to spend more money on education. And I'm almost like, no, you guys mismanage what you already have. So sometimes the answer isn't more money. It's how wisely are you spending the money you have? For example, if you're over budget every month and you look at your budget and you're eating out all the time. Now, yes, it'd be nice to make more money, but how could you fix that? Don't eat out so much, right? Buy groceries, cook at home, right? So sometimes it's the way we spend our money that's the problem. And so spending more often doesn't solve the problem if you actually look at the issue. A lot of times, healthcare, we spend more than most countries on healthcare, yet we have some of the highest expenses because we mismanage. Yes. So there's a lot of mismanagement. There's so much mismanagement and stuff like that. So I encourage you to be critical thinkers. And just because somebody says, well, we need more money for that, ask, where is the money that's already being used going? Is it being used as well as it could? Because before you're going to take more of my money, are you using your money well? Does that make sense? Like, sometimes taxes do need to be raised, but again, are we spending it wisely in the first place? And if not, then is that really fair to just take more money from people? You know, all are examples of remunerated power except, okay, let's see, regulation of schools. So it is not written in the Constitution that Congress will regulate schools, but they do because they write us checks, right? They send money to the states. The states oversee schools. So they regulate us to make sure that we are meeting at least basic criteria. We're in school at least 180 days. We offer the right number of subjects. We have approved curriculum, those kinds of things, okay? So that no matter what state you're going to, you're getting a decent education. All right, let's go to the legislative process. So the legislative process is, how does a bill become a law, okay? So I'm going to take you through the question real quick, and then we'll watch the video because they do a really good job of explaining it. And then we'll do our primary source, and I have your review sheet. Why is deal making important in the bill making process? Because the reality is most of the time you need Democrats and Republicans. A lot of times the money is there, it's being misused. Now, that doesn't mean in every single case, but education, absolutely, there's so much misuse of money, in so many different, healthcare, so much misuse of money. If you look at what we spend per person compared to other countries, like, we have such mismanagement. So there's a lot of cases where more money doesn't always solve the problem because we're mismanaging what we already have. Now, I'm not saying that we don't need to tax more in certain areas or we don't need to spend more. Again, that's open to debate. It really depends on the topic. But this whole we just need to tax more is not, look at what we're already spending and we overspend. Look at California. They're spending more than they ever have on people who are homeless, right? And the problem is worse. It's worse. So you've spent more money, yet the problem is worse. So is the money we're spending being used appropriately? Like, are we doing the right interventions? Are we tackling it? If from the outside looking in, you have more money than you've ever had before, yet the problem is getting worse. So we need to revisit how we're spending that money, right? And what we're doing so that the problem, because if it's getting worse, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I'm not approaching it correctly, you know? And again, it's open to debate how you do that. But if you spend more money and the problem gets worse, that should be first sign, right, that you need to revisit it and figure out another solution. Okay, how a bill becomes law. We're going to watch a quick video. Everybody has their theories about how to fix problems, right? So I don't claim to have all the answers, all right, and stuff, but whatever they're doing is not working. I have my own theories of what would work or would and stuff like that, but a lot of people do, you know, and then welcome to politics, right? All right, here, a bill becomes law. So process, how does a bill become a law? And it's kind of a broken down process of what we looked at on Tuesday.
This episode of Crash Course is brought to you by Squarespace.
Hi, I'm Craig, and this is Crash Course Government and Politics. And today, I've got my work cut out for me because I'm going to try to do something that every single social studies teacher in the U.S. has tried to do, even though there's a perfectly good cartoon you could just show. It's from the 70s. It's catchy. It's fun. That's right. Today, we're going to learn how a bill becomes a law, but we're not going to be able to license the Schoolhouse Rock song. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a... You know what has a bill? An eagle. Okay, I think the only way we're going to possibly be able to compete with Schoolhouse Rock is to jump right into the thought bubble with our own cartoon, and to stop talking about Schoolhouse Rock. So let's start at the very beginning, which in this case is a congressman or a senator introducing a bill. The real beginning is when he or she has an idea for a law, and even this might come from an interest group, the executive branch, or even the constituents. But the formal process begins with the legislator introducing the bill. After its introduction, the bill is referred to a committee. Although most bills can start in either house, except for revenue bills, which must start in the House, let's imagine that our bill starts in the Senate because it's it's easier. Congress has the power to make rules concerning the armed forces, so let's say this is a bill about naming helicopters. Anywho, this bill would be referred to the Senate Armed Services Committee, which would then write up the bill in formal legal language, or markup, and vote on it. If the markup wins a majority in the committee, it moves to the floor of the full Senate for consideration. The Senate decides the rules for debate, how long the debate will go on, and whether or not there will be amendments. An open rule allows for amendments, and a closed rule does not. Open rules make it much less likely for bills to pass because opponents of the bill can add clauses that will make it hard for the bill's proponents to vote for. If opponents of our helicopter name bill were to add a clause repealing the Affordable Care Act or something, some supporters of the bill probably wouldn't vote for it. If a bill wins the majority of votes in the Senate, it moves on to the House. Thanks, Thought Bubble. We're gonna have to go the rest of the way without fancy animation. But I could sing it. I'm not gonna sing it. I'm not gonna use a funny voice. The Senate version of the bill is sent to the House. The House has an extra step in that all bills, before they go out to the floor of the House, must go to the Rules Committee, which reports it out to the House. If a bill receives the majority of votes in the House, 238 or more to be exact, it passes. Yay! Now, this is important. The exact same bill has to pass both houses before it can go to the president. This almost never happens, though. Usually, the second house to get the bill will want to make some changes to it, and if this happens, it will go to a conference committee, which is made up of members of both houses. The conference committee attempts to reconcile both versions of the bill and come up with a new version, sometimes called a compromise bill. Okay, so if the conference committee reaches a compromise, it then sends the bill back to both houses for a new vote. If it passes, then it's sent to the president. And then the president signs the bill, boom, done. That's the only option. Oh, no, there's two other options. Option 2 is for him to veto the bill. And we've gone through all of this for nothing. The third option is only available at the end of a congressional term. If the president neither signs nor vetoes a bill, and then in the next 10 days Congress goes out of session, the bill does not become a law. This is called a pocket veto and is only used when the president doesn't want a law to pass, but for political reasons doesn't want to veto it either. Congress can avoid this altogether by passing bills and giving them to the president before that 10-day period. If the president neither signs nor vetoes a law and Congress remains in session for more than 10 days, the bill becomes a law without the president's signature. So that's the basic process, but there is one wrinkle, or if you want to be all Madisonian about it, check on the president's power. If Congress really wanted a bill and the president has vetoed it, they can override the veto if it gets a 2/3 majority in both houses on a second vote. Then the bill becomes a law over the president's signature. Oh, snap! This is really rare, but it does happen once in a great while. The Taft-Hartley Act of 1953 passed over Truman's veto. I like to call it the Tartley Act. Shorten it. It's a portmanteau. It doesn't happen that often because if the president knows that 2/3 of the congressmen supported the bill, he won't veto it. And if Congress knows that they don't have 2/3 support, they won't try to override the veto. Nobody wants to try something and fail in public, right? Except for me, obviously, if you look at my other YouTube channel, Wheezy Waiter. So there you have it, how a bill becomes a law. I'll admit the process is a little cumbersome, but it's designed that way so that we don't get a lot of stupid or dangerous laws. Still, this doesn't quite explain why so few laws get passed. Bills have a very high mortality rate, and it's way more common for a bill not to become a law than to become one. The main reason is that there are so many places where a bill can die. The first place that a bill can die is at the murderous hands of the Speaker or Majority Leader who refuses to refer it to committee. Then the committee can kill the bill by not voting for it at all. And if they do vote and it doesn't get a majority, then the bill doesn't go to the floor, and it's dead. In the Senate, the murderous leadership can kill a bill by refusing to schedule a vote on it, and any senator can filibuster the bill, which is when he or she threatens to keep debating until the bill is tabled. It's a bit more complex than that, but the filibuster rules have changed recently, so hopefully we won't have as many filibuster threats in the future. The House doesn't have a filibuster, but it does have a rules committee that can kill a bill by not creating a rule for debate. The entire House can also vote to recommit the bill to committee, which is a signal to drop the bill or change it significantly. And of course, if either House fails to give a bill a majority of votes, then it dies. This applies to compromise bills coming out of conference committees too. Even if a bill gets a majority of both houses, then there's that whole veto thing that the president can do. Remember? So, there are many more ways for a bill to be killed than to become a law. These hurdles are sometimes called veto gates. They can't call them Bill Gates because that's a person. Veto gates make it very difficult for Congress to act unless there's broad agreement or the issue is uncontroversial, like naming a post office or thanking specific groups of veterans for their service, which are two things that Congress actually does pretty efficiently. I mean, think of all the post offices that aren't named. You can't think of one, can you? Name it. You can't. It's not named. Veto gates are purely procedural, which means they don't draw a lot of attention from the media. The easiest way for Congress to kill bills is to simply not vote on them, or even schedule votes for them. This way they don't have to go on record as being for or against a bill, just whether they support having a vote. And constituents rarely check up on this sort of thing. So I hope I managed to do a good job of both explaining how a bill becomes a law and why it's difficult for most bills to pass. And I hope I looked good doing it as well. This might be frustrating, but it's strangely comforting to consider that Congress and the government as a whole were designed to make it difficult to get things done. A single super powerful executive like a king can be very efficient. but also tyrannical. We don't like tyrannical around here. The founders set up these structural hurdles of the bicameral Congress and the presidential role in legislation to reduce the likelihood that authoritarian laws would pass. Congress added procedural hurdles like committees and filibusters for the same reason. You can argue that Congress has become dysfunctional, but looking at the process of lawmaking, it's hard to argue that this isn't by design. So next time someone accuses you of being difficult, you just say, I was behaving in a senatorial manner.
Okay, so you can see it is a really lengthy process for a bill to become a law, all right? And it is slow, it is tedious, most fail, but it's done that way to safeguard us, to make sure we're not getting crazy outlier bills and stuff. It's that way in order to make sure that it's hopefully going through a filter process that is going to be best for the majority of the country, not just for a small little group, and then the rest of us have to comply, okay? So it is a tedious process and stuff like that, but it is meant to hopefully, the goal being more quality laws and not just a bunch of frivolous, ridiculous laws that we're like, oh my goodness, that can become overwhelming and ridiculous. All right. Let's look at our checking for understanding, and then we will do our primary source and we'll be done. Who may introduce a bill that does not have, who may introduce a bill that does not have anything to do with raising revenue? And that could be anyone, any member of the House or the Senate. So either branch or chamber. If the Senate and the House adopt different versions of the same bill, then which one goes to the president? Neither. So if the House votes on one and then it gets sent to the Senate and they change something, it has to go back to the House and pass. Only one version can go to the president, okay? You can't have two different versions. If there are, then they have to come together and negotiate and compile that into one version. If the president receives a bill and lets it sit unsigned for 2 weeks while Congress is still in session, what happens, okay? Let's see. The bill becomes a law even though the president didn't sign it. So this is a way, if the president knows something's going to pass, but they're running for re-election, so they don't want to be held accountable for it, that they can it's like plausible deniability. Oh, it slipped through. I didn't vote on it, if they're trying to get reelected. So we'll see that sometimes it's like a political game that'll be done. What role does the president play in the lawmaking process before a bill arrives on his or her desk? Okay, there's no formal role, but the president can try to influence Congress, talking to people, making deals, things like that. So they definitely try to influence laws or things that are important to them, especially if they ran on it for re-election. If they're trying to get elected or something like that, they will try to have certain bills passed because it helps them or their party to get more favor. What is the first substantive difference in the lawmaking process between the House and the Senate? Okay, and the biggest difference is that all bills in the House go to a committee first. There's so many members, it's hard to organize 435 people, so they always have it go to a committee beforehand. They have to have that extra filtration process. And then finally, how can Congress override the presidential veto? This happens very, very rarely, but they can if both override with 2/3 vote. Okay, so in order for a bill to become a law, you only have to have over 50%. But if you're going to veto, if you're going to go past the president's approval, then you have to have 2/3, which is really hard to do. Hence why most of the time that doesn't happen. Okay, so that wraps up our talk on legislative process. And now we're going to go to the primary source. All right, so as we've done before, number 8 and 9, you can delete, okay? So I put this in the announcements and stuff. So 8 and 9, if you haven't already, you can delete them, all right? Or just put skip in there. You don't have to do 8 and 9. So 7 will be the last part you need to do, the primary source. You do not need to do 8 and 9. Okay, so go ahead and take a second and delete number 8 and 9. Delete those two. Okay, and I did put in the announcements as well that you can remove those. Okay, the primary source, we're going to fill out this chart. So remember, this is a document that's relating to the topic, which for us is the legislative branch, so either the House or the Senate. So let's take a look at the document. So the primary source we're going to be looking at for this chapter is on the filibuster. Okay, so the filibuster is a tactic used by people in the House and the Senate when they are trying to kill a bill. Maybe they want to delay a vote or they want to try to avoid a vote on a bill. Usually it's done by the minority party, so whichever party is not in power, okay? And obviously that rotates, you know, from election to election. So sometimes the Democrats are the majority, sometimes Republicans are the majority, okay? Or sometimes it's different in the House or the Senate. So usually filibusters are done by the, no, you do not have to do 8 and 9, you can delete them, okay? So usually filibusters are done by someone from the party that's not in power, so the smaller party for that time period. So filibuster is where you literally take the floor, the Senate or the House floor, and you just talk a bill to death. You fill up time. People have done this for 10, 12 hours. Because once you stop talking, you got to go sit down. Okay, that's traditionally how a filibuster was done. It was a way to, again, try to delay or avoid a vote, to try to kill something that might be going through that they were against or opposed, or try to bring attention to it. So this article is a critique of the process in the Senate. So this is written by Jeffrey Merkley, and he was a sitting senator at the time, okay, from Oregon, a Democrat from Oregon, and basically saying the new way of doing filibusters is not working. So the new way in the 70s, they changed the filibuster from someone getting up and talking to death, and literally you could just get up and you could be silent. And the problem that he's going to argue in his 8-page assessment of this, which don't worry, we're not going to read it. Okay, I'm going to summarize it for you. Is he basically said it's being overused, it's being abused by changing the rules for how filibusters are done. It's going too far and it's being overused. Filibusters are supposed to be last case resort, very, very rare. You should be compromising, you should be negotiating, you should be working with each other. Instead, people are just going straight to filibuster and it's being overused. And he's basically arguing that we should go back to the old system where you have to talk. If you're going to filibuster, that you actually have to talk. Because let's be honest, talking for hours after hours after hours is going to be a lot harder than just being silent and standing up there. So he's saying that the floor should be only for talking filibusters, the old way of doing things. The current concept or unit, we're in the legislative branch, right? So, and this is a tactic that is used in the House and the Senate in the legislative branch to sway or to delay laws. What's unique, this is a memo that was sent out to other, so this was basically a memo that he wrote and he sent it out to all these other senators, kind of challenging them and saying, hey, we need to change these procedures. This is not helping us. This is hurting us, this procedure of filibuster. We need to find a better way to do this. Some of the new vocab: appropriation, being assigned. Rashi? So what is this about? So I'll kind of summarize the different sections of the article. So basically, the first part of his memo, he says, filibusters don't work today. We've changed the rules and it's become too much of a primary use to divide us, okay? Instead of it being a last case resort, which is what it was originally intended to be. It's supposed to be when all else has failed, then I use this. This is like my Hail Mary. But unfortunately, people are using it too much because it's easier now because they changed the rules with how to do it. So he's proposing we need to get back to it being harder to do so it's not being overused. He argues in the next part that we need to go back to where you need to be talking. And the reality is that this should be once in a while that it's being used, not on every single bill or all the time trying to get attention. We need to go back to working together and negotiating, and that being our first line of defense. So he discusses the rules and how, again, he thinks that they should go back to the original way of doing them, which is you need to be talking and under what circumstances. It's gotten too easy. Therefore, people aren't negotiating. We're supposed to, he's like in the Senate, we're supposed to be negotiating. We're supposed to be working together. We hash it out and then go have dinner, you know, like we're supposed to, we might be at odds, but we don't hate each other. And the problem is the overuse, it's caused a hatred, which means we don't work together and things don't get done, which is true. So overall, what is this about? He talks about how the silent filibuster is hurting them politically. It is causing disunity in the Senate instead of unity. Instead of encouraging an environment of working together, it's causing divisiveness. And that is not going to help our government. And I agree actually a lot with his article. Filibuster can be a good tool, but it's overused the way it's been written currently. So I'll give you a minute. You can copy those over into your chart. Give me a thumbs up once you have it copied over. We did 1 through 3 on Tuesday. So if you missed that, you can go back and watch that first video. And then we've done 4, 5, 6, and 7. Awesome. All right. So you don't have to do 8 and 9. And then going back over into Canvas, you're going to go to the next page and skip this, and then the submission page. Okay. Now I would do this checking for understanding vocab before I take my quiz. This is a great review of the vocab, making sure you know the definitions and how you would use them or in what circumstance you would use them. So again, I would do this, but I'm going to let you guys do that independently. This is where you'll submit your notebook. Okay. So make sure that you get that submitted. Let me change this so I can use this rubrics. Okay, so when you're done, I would go ahead and just get it submitted. So if you have it done today, get it submitted. If you just have a couple things you have to finish up, get it submitted today. All right. This is being part of bringing your grade up and doing well on your grade is finishing work when we're doing it and getting it in. So you don't forget about it so it doesn't just sit there and linger. All right. And then the other thing you're going to do is your quiz, which would be on the next page. So let's go over the review sheet. I have a review sheet for you that you can use. And again, remember, you're allowed to use the review sheet on the quiz, okay? So in Honor Lock, you can, that's fine. You're going to have about 10 minutes here at the end of class. You can work on it. So yeah, no rush. Here is the review sheet. So go ahead and click on that. Now, what I would do is I would make sure I would save this to my Google Drive, okay? So you can add it, go to Move, and you can add this to your Google Drive, add it to your government folder, okay? So that when you go back to take the quiz, it's there. All right. Now, remember, you can also find it on the home page on modules. You can find it on the lesson and recording page for this week. Okay. So you can also find it on this page right here. So you can always find the assessment review sheets that I provide on the week. All right. So there it is. There's Tuesday's video, and then I'll post today's down here. Now, on the review sheet, okay, it gives you the vocab. So if you want to add to it, if you want to put the definitions or something, then I would do File, Make a Copy. And again, you can save that to your government folder, and that'll allow you to add or edit to this. All right. And then it summarizes each page kind of that we went through. Here's the requirements for House of Representatives and some of their roles, some of the facts about that. Like states like California have the most. They have 435 members. You know, how are they different? They have a 2-year term versus 6-year term in the Senate. Here's requirements for the Senate. Okay. Here's the enumerated powers. We went over those. Those checking for understanding questions are also in here. So for example, how can Congress override the president? The House and the Senate can each have a 2/3 vote to override, you know, so you can find those checking for understanding questions also in here. Okay, so definitely use this when you take your quiz. These are really, really helpful. So remember, if you're going to have it digitally, you have to let the proctor know that you're allowed to have that extra tab open. Okay, you have to advocate with that with the proctor in Honor Lock. Okay, because otherwise they'll close your tabs. All right, or you can print it off and you can have it as hard copy notes. So either is fine. Any questions on that? Okay, so we have about 15 minutes. So I'll let you go a few minutes early, but let's take the next 10 minutes. Finish up your notebook and get it submitted. So that's what I need done. I need you to finish up your notebook, get anything you needed, copy and paste it over, and then get that submitted. Okay, and get that submitted. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay, so we'll hang out. Okay, great. So we're going to hang out for a few minutes because of attendance. All right, so you can finish this up, get this submitted, and then I'll let you go at 11:40. Let me know if you have questions.